Hello, it's the final day, and I always save the best for last. This year we're ending strong with the coming-of-age drama/sports movie Breaking Away from 1979. Now, I know there's a heavy focus on Golden Age of Hollywood films with these reviews, and this one kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, but this is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I think it's one that's been grossly forgotten in recent years. Which is weird because this film was nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. The film follows a group of boys the year after graduating high school. They live in a Midwestern college town and kill time by goofing off every day. One of the boys, played by Dennis Christopher, has become infatuated with biking and Italian culture in general, so much so that it's driving his dad, played by Paul Dooley, crazy, but sparking new life in his mother, played by Barrie. From there, lots of things happen. Christopher masquerades as an Italian foreign exchange student to impress a girl, his friend group debates whether they should go their separate ways, and they feud with some preppy college kids. The greatest strength of this movie is its script, which I'd like to add won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay back in 1979. This film could have easily been disjointed and awkward, but every scene feels necessary and, above all, enjoyable to watch. Some of the best parts of this movie are just watching the friend group lounge around and talk about nonsense. The dialogue all feels organic. It never feels like one mind came up with all of these lines. It truly feels like these characters are making it all up on the spot. Not only that, but there's a timeless quality to it. They pretty much avoid 70s slang and pop culture references. It's helped the movie age well. Another thing I really like is the setting. It was shot in Bloomington, Indiana, where Indiana University is. Many films taking place in the Midwest usually aren't shot there, and if you grew up in the Midwest like I did, you can often tell the difference. Besides my personal bias, it's just nice to see a difference in locale. It gives the film a unique look compared to other movies of the time. The town helps give the film an identity. If you took one frame out of context, you'd still be able to tell this was Breaking Away. What also helps in giving it its identity is that it takes place in a college town. College towns are rarely depicted on film, and when they are, they usually always follow the students. Here, they give a new perspective with the townsfolk, who just so happen to inhabit the same space. We see that university events affect their lives just as much as the students. For some characters, it bugs them a lot, and for others, it's all they've ever known, so they don't think twice about it. When I first heard about this movie, I said to myself, it's just bicycling. How are they going to make that exciting for an hour and 45 minutes? Well, they found a way. Every sequence is done very well. Even when Christopher is training, you find yourself engaged the whole time. The filmmakers executed a variety of methods to make each scene just as entertaining as the last. Even on multiple rewatches, these parts never become stale. The final race is especially fantastic. With some carefully chosen edits and shots, it becomes the most thrilling sequence in the entire film. There's so much happening at every moment, but you never feel lost. The film cleverly builds up to this climax without us catching on, and when we finally get to it, we're invested the whole time. So yeah, never underestimate a movie about cycling. For me, this is the ultimate don't judge a book by its cover, and made me expand my film viewing horizons. The movie also does a great job of balancing comedy and drama. This again is due to the impeccably written script. There are times where this film gets very goofy, and other times where it bears a significant emotional weight, sometimes in the same scene. It all flows so well and reminds me how life isn't always serious or silly. It has serious moments and funny ones. Many films have a tough time depicting this and often come off as clumsy, but I can't talk about this film without spotlighting the amazing characters and performances. This movie has some of my favorite characters of all time, and some of my favorite performances. Christopher and his friends are all fantastic. All these guys are well developed and interesting characters who bring a great dynamic to the group. They're played by Dennis Quaid, Jackie Earle Haley, and Daniel Stern, all of which would go on to have prolific careers. Dennis Quaid is probably the most interesting out of all the characters. He's a disgruntled townie who hasn't come to terms yet with the idea that his best years are probably behind him. He spends lots of time talking about high school and looking at the college kids with resentment. You understand where he's coming from. He can be a jerk sometimes, but he's never unlikable. He's loyal to his friends and has a good sense of humor. Quaid brings a lot of vulnerability to this role that you can see early on. Often his dialogue conveys one thing while his face says another. From the moment you meet him, you can tell his anger is a shield for how he really feels about himself. In a way, he's very relatable because I think we've all used anger as a way to cope with some sort of grief. Jackie Earle Haley is another character with a short temper, and honestly, at times, he's more of a hothead than Quaid. As you can see, he's quite a bit shorter than everybody else, and the film plays into that. Whenever someone belittles him for his height, he immediately acts out, and lots of repercussions follow. But he's not just a one-note character. He has a girlfriend, and they constantly talk about whether or not they should take their relationship to the next level. You get a sense that neither of them is ready, but they feel that's what's expected of them to do since their parents were around their age when they got married. Haley also takes advantage of the more mundane scenes to express his character. These moments are a little more nuanced, but they help make him feel like a well-rounded person. Daniel Stern as Cyril is hilarious. There's no other way to put it. I mean, just look at him. Even when he's not saying something, he's funny. He has great comedic timing and the ability to make okay lines sound hilarious. He's probably the most relaxed out of everybody. While they're all having their own internal crisis, he's just out there having a good time. I think Stern captures the dumb, funny friend perfectly. Many times in movies, these characters are written too stupid to be taken seriously. Thankfully, Cyril is written very well, and Stern propels the character even further. Cyril isn't an idiot, but he's definitely the least intelligent out of the group. He has many moments that make you say, what the heck are you talking about? Like near the beginning of the movie, they're all relaxing by an abandoned quarry, and Stern just starts talking about how he wishes he was a cartoon character. He thinks it's cool whenever cartoon characters get hit with an object and their bodies retain that shape for a couple seconds. Again, where the heck did that come from? But let's be real, we've all had friends like that. But he isn't just all fun and games. He does have a few serious moments, just not as many as his friends. Dennis Christopher brings a great performance to an already great character. He allows his newfound obsession to consume his life, but he's never annoying about it. Half the time he's spouting random words in Italian, and you can tell he doesn't actually have a grasp on the language, but it's just so fun to watch. And also, he isn't like this all the time. He knows when to turn it off, specifically around his friends. Something I also like about him is his determination. Christopher is a hard worker, and you get the sense that he's willing to go all in with cycling. I think since almost everyone can ride a bike, they underestimate the physical exhaustion Christopher puts himself through, and the wide shots sometimes make it hard to tell how fast he's going. But Christopher's facial expressions help communicate his struggle. It makes him very admirable, and I think feeds into the audience's interest in each of the cycling scenes. But as good as the kids are, Christopher's parents are even better. Paul Dooley and Barbara Barrie give career bests in this film. In a typical movie, Barrie would be the common ground between the drastically different father and son characters, but she doesn't really do that. In fact, she enjoys her son's newfound interest. It keeps him active, he seems a lot happier, and she actually enjoys it when he blasts Italian opera throughout the house. When Dooley complains, she tells him to shut up in the nicest way possible, cluing us in to how well they know each other. But with that being said, she also subtly lets us know she's just as confused as Dooley is. She has no idea where this came from, but because of all the positives mentioned before, she supports her son. So it's not a mom understands her child more than the dad stereotype. It's refreshing and adds some realism to the film. Barrie was actually nominated for an Oscar for her performance, but lost to Meryl Streep for Kramer vs. Kramer. But the person who steals the show is undoubtedly Paul Dooley. This is one of my favorite performances of all time. He's funny, serious, stoic, and touching. I can't think of too many actors with such an amazing range that comes off so genuine. His comedic timing is perfect on every beat. There's not a single line that doesn't work, but his physicality is also hilarious. Dooley was a big fan of Buster Keaton, and there are some key scenes where you can see his influence at work. His character is a used car salesman, and one of the best scenes is when someone tries to return a junker to him. He throws himself in front of the car and literally tries to pick it up. What follows is one of the best edits in the entire film, which I won't spoil simply because it's better to see it rather than have me describe it. In essence, he's an angry dad character. He's always high-strung, and most of the time he's shouting, but he never comes off as unlikable, and that's solely due to Dooley's performance. Because, 1, Dooley has mastered the funny yell. Just listening to him scream is enough to put me in stitches. 2nd, Dooley subtly brings some other emotions to his delivery. For example, he may shout at Dennis Christopher a lot, and I can't help but laugh, but we still get a sense that he loves his son. Many angry dads in media come off as too cruel to be likable, but here, we realize Dooley may be mad, but deep down, he still loves Christopher. It makes later scenes where he's having serious talks with him so much more effective. Probably my favorite example of this is when Dooley and Christopher walk through the college campus, and Dooley reveals he helped cut the stone that built a lot of the administration buildings. Yeah, that's something I forgot to mention. The main source of jobs in the community, besides the university, is the quarry where they cut stone. Some of the more elitist students refer to the townsfolk as cutters, which is meant to be more of an insult. During this scene, Christopher shares with his dad that he hoped to do something more with his life, but he's finally realizing he's meant to be a cutter. Dooley looks up at his son and says, "You're not a cutter." The scene goes on from there, but the initial command in Dooley's stare and delivery brings so much power to the scene. It's one of the best moments from the movie, and I've never forgotten it. According to Paul Dooley's book, Movie Dad, he based his performance off his own father, and this film started a long career of playing dads in countless movies. Paul Dooley was born Paul Brown on February 22nd, 1928, in Parkersburg, West Virginia. From a young age, he had a love for comedy, whether it was movies, radio shows, or cartoons. His affinity for it is what attracted him to showbiz. He moved to New York and started acting on stage and commercials after college. His first major role came in 1965 during the original run of The Odd Couple on Broadway. He was the understudy of Art Carney, who played Felix Unger. Carney was battling alcoholism at the time and had to drop out of the play, so Dooley was able to step in and played alongside Walter Matthau. Throughout the 60s and early 70s, Dooley was a familiar face in commercials, TV, and stage productions. But Dooley also had the occasional writing job, and his biggest break came when he was recruited by Sam Gibbon and Dave Connor to help create a children's educational TV show. Dooley would go on to co-create The Electric Company, which ran from 1971 to 1977. Dooley's big break in movies came when he met Maverick director Robert Altman. Altman saw a play Dooley was in called Hold Me, and cast him in a supporting role in his next picture, A Wedding. Altman would cast Dooley 3 more times, including as Wimpy in the 1980 musical, Popeye. But the role that lampooned him into the public eye was in Breaking Away. Critics and audiences were wild about him, and thus began a successful career in movies. No matter what role Dooley played, he always made a big impact on screen. Some of his most memorable films include 16 Candles, Runaway Bride, Insomnia, and Sarge in Pixar's Cars. In 1984, he would marry his third wife, Winnie Halsman. Halsman has a prolific career as a writer that I don't have time to go into, but I did want to mention that she would go on to co-write the Broadway sensation Wicked. At the time I'm writing this, Paul Dooley is still working. He published a memoir, Movie Dad, in 2022. It's full of interesting tidbits about his many great hits, and gives an interesting glimpse into his obsession with comedy. Dooley is one of those actors where every time you see him on screen, you know you're in for a good performance. Why he never became a bigger name? I'll never know. He does have an interesting body of work that I've been happily diving into lately, so maybe more will discover him in the future. Like I said before, I think his performance in Breaking Away is one of the best comedic performances of all time. Every time I see it, I'm in awe. So if you want to discover one of the most underappreciated supporting actors of all time, or want to discover an invigorating coming-of-age film about biking, or heck, if you just want to watch a really good movie, then I highly recommend Breaking Away.